The following is a Spirit Street production.
Man, there is still a lot going on in the world of college athletics. It seems like every time we turn around, something new is happening. But today we're going to dive into this ACC thing again. See, I told you we weren't going to let it go. It seems more and more that we dive into this, the more and more it seems like, yep, it's about to be over. So we're going to keep bringing you that information today on the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Brien Hanley. Today we got Tim Fitzgerald from GoPowercat. Fitz, man, this conference realignment, transfer portal, NIL, blah, blah, blah. It never seems to end. More and more this week, just to let everybody know, we are going to talk. Number one, tomorrow we're going to have a little transfer portal stuff, some more stuff. But then later on in the week, we've got a couple of ACC teams that are going to be coming in, and we're going to dive even more. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What's going on with the ACC, and is it going to be around? So, Fitz, it just seems like more and more that as time goes on, it seems like the deadline, or should I say crunch time for the ACC, it seems to be getting shorter and shorter. Yeah. And that shelf life, I think it's, I don't know. I think it's right around the corner. We get big, big news here.
Yeah, I think this has reached the point of being untenable for all parties involved. I don't see any way that Florida State and Clemson at this point stay in the conference. It just doesn't seem like there's a proper solution. There's not enough revenue to give them what they want and be fair in any way to everyone else. It's been unfair, in fairness to Florida State, because they're worth much more than what they've been getting. But if you're the ACC at this point with these many court things going on, you're hoping to chop off the arm to save the patient.
Correct.
It's going to suck without the arm, but it's better than being gone.
Right.
And their proactive moves to add Stanford, Cal, and then SMU was to keep them in compliance with their TV contract that says the contract comes back open for negotiation if they dip below 15.
Right.
So they have planned on losing those two schools. Those three schools wouldn't be joining the ACC this summer if not for the fact that the chances are good in the near future Florida State and Clemson will be free of that conference. Now the ACC just doesn't want that to snowball. But if those two schools go to the Big Ten, Brien, don't you think the SEC is going to want a little taste? I do.
I would absolutely believe so. Now, look, on one hand, we can look at it as, the ACC being proactive, something that the Pac-12 was not. Pac-12 just thought we're better than everybody. And things are going to come back to us. We'll just wait and negotiate this thing out. And boom, it was over. I mean, like a bolt of lightning, it was over. And they basically got the rug just yanked out from, I don't even know if you would say yanked. It was snatched. Whatever you want to call it. Jiminy Christmas. And then it was gone in the blink of an eye. The ACC is like, okay, we see what can happen here. We've got to do something. And whether it's, I love your analogy of, cut off the arm, not nose to spite your face. You're cutting off your arm to save the patient. Hey, that's sometimes that's what you got to do. And losing Clemson and Florida State would be like losing an arm. Look, here's the thing about Clemson. I know a lot of people, you think back 15 years ago, Clemson wasn't this powerhouse.
Right.
Clemson didn't have the cachet that, a Florida State has. And that's what I find so fascinating with the ACC. If you go back 15 years ago, it was Miami. Miami had the cachet, and Florida State has always had it. Let's just be honest. It's been around for years, decades, Florida State's had it. But it was not Clemson. Until Clemson started winning in football, which you have to give them all the credit for, they were on the outside looking in of all of this. But that's flipped. And now it's Miami. And I think Miami Fitz is on the outside looking in because they haven't done anything. If we're just talking football, because, look, football drives this ship by a wide margin. Miami hasn't been relevant If we're talking real relevancy, in 20 years. They just haven't been. Now, we can say that we know the brand, we understand the brand and all of that stuff, but branding only gets you so far if you're not any good anymore. And branding, it doesn't do anything if you're constantly 8-4, 7-5. You've had 5 coaches in the last 20 years. I mean, because they keep getting fired. That's a problem. And Clemson has taken their spot. That has got to be a sore subject for Miami, because I think Miami thought all along they were going to be the team that everybody wanted, and teams still may want them.
Yep.
But I think if Miami's smart, I think they got to start calling the Big 12 and saying, look, if this ACC thing goes south, we want in there, because I don't think that the SEC or the Big 10 are going to bite on them, Fitz.
No, and if you go back, Virginia Tech was above
absolutely
Clemson in the pecking order, and
yes,
they're not in the pecking order right now.
They're not in it at all.
And that shows you the difference between having kind of long-term success that Bobby Bowden brought for FSU, as opposed to the little bit shorter but extensive window that Virginia Tech had of success. Florida State established itself as a sub-blue blood, one step below. As we've discussed, blue bloods were established before Florida State had football. I mean, that's just the reality. It used to be all women's college. Now they do it all, and the blue bloods were already set in stone. But they're in that next tier.
Yes.
And it's a really valuable commodity. I think they're headed for the Big Ten. I think that's where they want to go. They feel like they don't want to join Florida in a conference when they can maybe put themselves in a better position. I kind of agree with them, even though it'll be a lot of travel. But poor Miami. If you look at it from Miami's standpoint, they've gone from the top of the hill, the top of the mountain, to now they're down in the valley with what is perceived to be the peasants, which is the Big 12. If from that perspective, they feel like they're going to end up at the worst option possible. If they're even afforded that option, they're probably too hard to pass up, but they're also kind of a handful at times. And I'll be interested to see how much interest the Big 12 really does have. It's probably too good to pass on.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, again, we talked about cutting off your arm to save the patient. Okay, well, let's not skip over pennies, or basically skip over dollars looking for a $10 bill if you're the Big 12. I get where they might be down in the pecking order, but let's not be silly. If we could get Miami to be in the conference, that would be a win for the Big 12. Not to mention, they need a partner. We've always talked about having travel partners. And if we're going to have travel partners, while Orlando isn't right next to Miami, it's not that far away when we're talking about a flight. So that would be an ideal travel partner with UCF to get Miami in.
Right.
Looking other places. And again, I know we've covered this from time to time. You mentioned Virginia Tech. I don't know, Fitz. I'm not that keen on bringing Virginia Tech into the Big 12 anymore. I used to be really keen, thought they needed to be. I think we got to look at an NC State. I don't think NC State is attached to the hip with North Carolina. I don't believe that. We're going to have North Carolina on, by the way, on Friday to talk about that. But I don't think they're attached at the hip. I think they would be a welcome fit into the Big 12, and they kind of fit into what the Big 12 is. Good schools, good as far as good branding, play really good football. We saw if they can put something together. They've always played decent basketball. We saw them in the Final Four this year. I know that was kind of an aberration, but at the same time, they were there. So it doesn't really matter how you get there as long as you're there. I think they would be a really, really good fit. I like NC State before I like Virginia Tech. I just do.
I don't disagree. Virginia Tech slipped a long ways.
Yeah.
You look at their TV ratings that they're bringing, and maybe it's a lot of being relegated to lesser channels. That's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy of TV ratings. You get a crappy channel, you're going to get probably crappy ratings. But they have slipped a long ways.
Yeah.
And their value has too. It will be interesting to see how this sorts out, because you're going to have West Virginia and Cincinnati on in 2 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
To talk about their perspective on adding ACC schools. And I'm going to be really interested to hear what they say about Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville, some of those, that are in their northern area of the
Right.
ACC that overlaps with West Virginia and Cincy. I'm interested in what they're going to want, but you're right. If they can get another far southern addition to go with UCF, you got to take it. I mean,
Yes.
I think they might even consider Georgia Tech because of that.
Mhm.
You look at, I mentioned this in a previous show, K-State, when it plays in volleyball, is going to Arizona and playing both schools in a matter of 3 or 4 days. And
Right.
then they're going to go do Cincinnati and West Virginia the same way in volleyball.
Right.
You add someone with UCF to do that. I mean, I know it would be a living hell for winter sports to have to go to Florida for like a week and practice and do your school and be in Florida, choosing between Orlando and Miami. I know that's difficult, but I think that's, probably what the Big 12 would like. And honestly, they kind of need to establish a little bit of Eastern balance in the fact that if you want to go to more logical scheduling instead of the nonsense that they did, you will have scheduling partners, groups of 4 or 5 that you'll play every year in football. And I think that's something they really need to look at, that they ignored last time, and people weren't very happy that they're not playing some of their rivals.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing that the Pac-12, look, there's a lot of things that the Pac-12 did wrong. The one thing that they actually always did right, and I always thought it was fascinating, is they went to the pod scheduling. You go to Arizona, you're playing both Arizona and Arizona State. You go to Oregon, you're playing Oregon and Oregon State. Same thing with LA, with USC and UCLA. That they just that was perfect. It worked out perfect. Big 12 needs to get back to that with some of these Olympic sports or non-revenue type of sports. You have to go to that kind of scheduling. So you have to start looking at schools that are going to give you that pod type of atmosphere. That's why bringing Louisville in is just, first of all, would have made a lot of sense way back when they didn't do it. Thank you, Texas. But at the other side of that is just with the proximity. First of all, just think you go to Louisville, and then even if it's 2 days later, you play Cincinnati. Well, that'll save you money because it's not even a plane flight. It's a bus ride. Well, that saves money right there just because you're taking a bus versus having to fly somewhere else. It's stuff like that you have to start to think of when you're bringing in these schools, when we're putting together this conference and we're talking about the ACC going away. Start looking at it logistic wise for it to make sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of Louisville, I think they're the ideal fit. I would take Louisville over Pitt all day long. Now, look, that's selfish reasons, number one, but logistic reasons and just for branding. First of all, Pitt doesn't want to be in the Big 12. I mean, they've acted like, nah, we're not going to go to the Big 12. They think they're going to get an invite to the Big 10 or the SEC, and I got news for them. That's not coming.
Yeah.
There's no way that's coming. But they act like, if they have to go to the Big 12, that it would be a burden for them. Well, okay, if it's a burden, we'll just keep you out. You can stay right where you're at. I think Louisville over Pitt makes a heck of a lot of sense. Louisville's struggling in basketball right now, but that'll come back. They're not struggling in football, and they've shown that they can be as good as anybody in the Big 12 in football when it comes down to it. They've got plenty of money. They got the facilities. They would be an outstanding fit for the Big 12.
Yeah, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And my apologies to the viewers for me looking at my phone. We have some breaking news happening with something related to K-State. We'll touch on that in a little bit.
Sure.
You just have to find the right fit. You don't want to invite in programs that don't fit your culture and don't really want to be here. And honestly, I think for now, Utah falls into that, not culture, but they don't want to be here. I think once they get into it, they'll go, oh yeah, this is okay. But I don't know what Pitt really brings you. I mean, West Virginia is in the Pittsburgh market. It's not as big probably in that market, but it's there.
Yep.
And, even though it's not about markets, it's more about rivalries. There's other rivalries out there. But also, if they go into the ACC, don't rule out UConn being higher than some ACC schools on the Big 12's wish list. Don't forget basketball. I I heard another creator who's done a lot on this topic mention that, well, I think the Big Ten will take Duke in basketball and Duke will go to the Big 12 in every other sport. I'm like, why would the Big 12 do that? That is a gross misunderstanding of what the Big 12 is doing.
Right.
It's so far down the roadly absurd. I don't even know what to say to you. They're not going to take Duke without basketball. They may not take Duke with basketball. So there'll be some choices, and we're going to probably, if this does happen, it's going to really expose exactly what Brett Yormark is after.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a quick break here, Fitz. We'll come back after we take the break, and we'll hear from you on what some of that K-State news is. And, maybe it's surprising, maybe it's not. We'll see what it is. But either way, we're going to hear from a word from our sponsor, Synergy Financial Partners, and we'll be right back.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right. Well, thanks for being back with us here on Big 12 Insider. So, Fitz, you said there was some news, some late breaking news here about K-State. Let's hear something about what it is, if you can. Tell us whatever you can tell us.
It's actually more about future Big 12 program Colorado than K-State. It has been reported now by 24/7 Sports that Dylan Edwards will be going into the transfer portal. And everyone at K-State is familiar with that recruiting process and how kind of drawn out it became. Commits to K-State, decommits, commits to Notre Dame, decommits, ends up at Colorado because his family has a relationship with Deion. Well, apparently that relationship isn't going well, and Deion is recruiting over the top of the guy who he said is his number one running back. He's adding 2 veteran running backs through the portal. And while he's not officially in the portal yet, we're told it is in process. And I see a question in the chat. Would K-State want him after what happened? Hell yes, they would want him. He's a special player. He fits this team. K-State needs a second running back that has a little experience. He brings to the table someone that can sit in the slot, someone that can do kick and punt returns, and someone who has a relationship, a deep relationship with your starting quarterback, Avery Johnson. People don't understand how close these two kids are, how close the families are, even though they played at rival high schools. We'll see what that list ends up being. I'm hearing Notre Dame won't be involved, but certainly some schools. I heard Nebraska might be sniffing around him, A&M. He's going to get some interest. And the question becomes, does he want to go through the process again where it was so hard for him to decide and he kept jumping around, or does he just want to lock in, come home, and be part of the Kansas State football program as soon as possible? It's going to be an interesting week with Dylan Edwards and a lot of stuff going on. The transfer portal is going to be hopping later this week.
Yeah. And I've got Adam Munster-Tiger that covers Colorado for 24/7 Sports coming on tomorrow, just for everybody's perspective, to talk about, Fitz, what in the hell is going on at Colorado. Look, the transfer portal, it is what it is. And every school has lost somebody. But the number of people that have jumped in the transfer portal in the spring, portal time, whatever you want to call it, the spring period for Colorado has been insane. If you lose 10, 15, whatever many guys, 20, up to 20 guys, in December, that's one thing. But for people to go through spring practice and then decide, you know what, this just isn't it for me, that's a cultural problem.
Yep.
I've said it on many occasions that's a cultural problem. I've also said on many occasions that I'm rooting for Deion to succeed, because I believe that college football, number one, with him in it, it's been exciting. Number two, Colorado, college football's better if Colorado can be good. It just is. And maybe that's selfish, because I remember growing up when Colorado was so good, and it kind of tailed off a little bit when I got into college, but they were still relevant. And they just haven't been the last 15 to 20 years. I think they're better. And what he's doing, I thought, okay, that's great. Everything's for show. Everything's on camera. Things are working. I don't want to dive too much into this because we'll get into it with Adam tomorrow, but Fitz, it's a cultural issue.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that all these kids are just leaving because in the springtime over nothing. Something has to be going on there, and we'll find out hopefully tomorrow exactly what's going on.
Yeah, it's the transfers, the recent transfers that I've seen mention. I saw one guy flat out say, "I want to go to a real football program." And look, Deion's approaching this much differently than most college coaches. It's more of an NFL atmosphere. Take care of your stuff, show up for work.
Right.
I don't know that works in college.
No.
These kids aren't mature enough. They need to be reassured. They're still trying to figure out who they are as a person, let alone player.
Right.
And I think you got to be a little more soft-handed with college kids, particularly in this modern era. And I think that's failing. I think he's lost some perspective, and there's just too much focus on his sons and what they can get and how they're doing. I think other players are just grown really tired of it.
Yeah. And like I said, we'll get into more with that tomorrow with Adam, but I think you're right. I think people are wising up, or kids' parents. I know that a lot of time we get into people getting the transfer portal and there's people in somebody's ear and they're don't have the best, the best intentions or whatever the case may be. But I think some of these people do. And they're like, look, for your development, we got to go somewhere else. So we'll figure that part of it out. But back to, more of the ACC type of stuff. Look, in my opinion, I think the quicker that we find out what's going on here, I think it's better for everybody. I think it's better for the ACC to know what they have to do to move forward. I think it's better for all the schools and just everybody involved to say, okay, are we going to be here or are we not? And I don't think the ACC in itself is going to necessarily go away. Oh. I just think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to leave because, look, Boston College, where are they going to go? And that's not a knock on Boston College or Wake Forest, but I'm just being honest. Like, where are you going to go? With Syracuse, where are you going to go? And those are fine institutions. They're fine schools. They play they're good schools. I mean, they play at good levels of football, basketball, and everything, but they're just not the most attractive place for somebody to go. So the ACC will still be around.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of where they're going to go. Now, here's the outlier. You mentioned them earlier, Duke. If football's driving this, and we all know that it is, Duke doesn't have a place. They don't have a place. I know that's weird for people to hear. What are you talking about, Brien? It's Duke. Yes, we do know Duke, but we know Duke is Duke basketball. And do you think the Big 12 just says, you know what? In order to pick you up in basketball, we'll bring you on and just say, we'll deal with whatever your football brings. By the way, their football's been getting better.
Yep.
Now they lost their coach, so we'll see how that continues. But it's been getting better. And if it can continue and just compete, that's all they really need to do is just compete. Just compete. You see Vanderbilt in the SEC, they don't compete. So if Duke can just compete, that's got to be a big win for the Big 12, doesn't it, Fitz?
Yeah. I would think Duke's best chances are with the Big 12.
Yeah.
They do fit the Big Ten's academic needs.
Right.
The Big Ten's, they like basketball too.
Sure.
We can clearly see they don't really care about football outside of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and maybe now USC. Right. Everyone else is supposed to lose to them. That's their role in this thing. So I'm very intrigued by what happens with Duke. And as you mentioned, I think the ACC lives on with altered membership and an altered TV contract and less money. But the shakedown of this is going to be as the Power Three, if this happens with the ACC, continues to add members, we're going to see those other conferences consolidate.
Yeah.
The Mountain West is probably going to join the Pac-12 with Washington State and Oregon State and just be the Pac whatever. And I think a lot of the American Conference will end up in the ACC. South Florida will be in tomorrow.
Yes.
If this goes down. If if it goes down, Tulane's in tomorrow. Both
Right.
really good academic schools, may I add, that fit what the ACC's been. So there's some options out there for the ACC to maintain its existence, but just not at the same level. You can't lose all of your major brands and really not have a mid-level, mid-tier that's functioning. Big 12 lost some really good brands, but they had a middle of the conference that was really sound and solid that could still form a really competitive conference. I don't know if you're down to Syracuse, Boston College, Wake, maybe Georgia Tech, possibly Duke, if you can make that claim. But if you end up with 4 or 5 schools left out, you got a pretty good addition there to, an opportunity to add some schools that will really bring you back up to numbers and be kind of a fun conference. It'll still be the ACC.
Right. And look, I think and I know I've mentioned this before, is I don't think anybody really wants to see the ACC go away.
No, I don't.
If I had my preference, I say everybody stays and just keep the ACC the way that it is. The problem is that's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, money's involved, lawyers are involved, and we all know when that happens, those schools, they're going to find a way out.
Mhm.
And that's just the reality of it. But yeah, I don't want it to go away. I know a lot of people, they've contacted me, Fitz, and they've said, well, it seems like you're rooting for it to happen. No, I'm not rooting for it to happen. I'm just dealing with the reality of what's going to happen. It's just, I don't want it to happen, but I know it will. So what are we going to do about it? You can either embrace it or you can try to fight it. Well, why fight something that you're not going to win? I'm too old to do that. Back in my younger days, I would have done that. But now we just have to live in reality and just understand, hey, this is where things are going. It's unfortunate that it's gotten to this point. But it is, it's to this point. It's all money generated, but I don't want to just say that it's money generated, Fitz, because these things have been a business forever.
Yeah.
And I just think that maybe it's twisted a little bit because the money is so great. I think that's part of what it is. The money is just so great now, is that, okay, we got to get to the place where we can get the most money. But it's always been a business. I mean, these were not non-for-profit schools, conferences, athletic departments. None of that was non-for-profit, although schools, I guess, technically are supposed to be non-for-profit.
Yep. Well, they do a good job of staying unprofitable. Most athletic departments lose money, so that solves that. My company's a nonprofit, not that we're donating anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm interested to where this sees. We're going to take one more quick break here, and then we'll end the show. And I'll have one question for you about who do we think goes when the ACC goes. We'll be right back after we hear a word from Synergy Financial Partners.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Fitz, I'm going to bring up this question here. Or not really a question, it's a statement. I like this from our man Allen here. My preference was the Big 8 and then got used to the Big 12 next. That's exactly what this is all about, is that nobody ever usually likes change. For the most part, people don't like change, but change is inevitable. So you just get used to it. I was the same way. I loved the Big 8. Heck, I started getting recruited by Kansas State. It was still the Big 8 until the Big 12 came into existence in 96. So it was like, okay, well, that's, or 90, 96.
96.
That's something new. But it is what it is. And this will be the same way. So not a whole lot that we can do about that. We got another one of our man. Thanks for the super chat, Mr. Canelo. Hypothetically, if the Big 12 ends up with NC State, Miami, Louisville, save for Ohio State and Michigan, are we close to the Big 10? And I don't think the answer to that, I think, is no. Now, maybe competitive wise, yes. But if we're talking dollars, I don't think they're close.
I think he's talking about
competitive.
Competitive, yeah.
Then I don't think the Big 12 right now is that far off from the
I
Big
agree.
Ten. I just, you take out, well, I mean, they added in Oregon and Washington, which I think Washington is going to fall off a cliff. UCLA is not very good. And heck, when your head coach decides to go be an offensive coordinator at a school within your conference, how good is your football program? So there's that. We'll see about USC. But I think right now, I don't think they're that far off anyway, Fitz. I really don't. Not competitive wise.
Well, yeah. And Cornelio, I think those are the three schools in his question here. NC State, Miami, and Louisville would be the foundation schools, I believe, to what the Big 12 would want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look, if Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, if one of those schools says, yeah, we'd like to come to the Big 12.
That's different.
Yeah. Do I? It's, I told my wife, if Halle Berry calls and says, I'm interested, well, I gotta talk. I might need some more NIL money. But who do they want after that? What do they want to do after that? I think UConn's the fourth out of that, unless there's someone really tantalizing out there. And I'm telling you, Virginia is going to be, people are sleeping on Virginia. Sports, blah. But remember, it's not the ADs making this choice. It's the chancellors and presidents. And Virginia is as storied of an academic institution as you will find playing Power 5 football, period.
Yes. Yeah. They're the name that a lot of people don't necessarily bring up all the time, but they're the name that they're going to get scooped up without question. It's just people don't always throw their name Virginia out there, but Virginia's not going to have a hard time finding a home. I don't know if it'll necessarily be the SEC, but it could be. But I think the Big Ten, is more of where they will go. But heck, who knows? If the Big 12 could get Virginia, then you would take Virginia. You would want to get Virginia. So without question. But that kind of answers the question. I was going to ask, who do you think goes? And I think that kind of answered that question on who we think goes and stays. I love the fact that you brought up the huge outlier with all of this, Duke and UConn.
Right.
UConn, I think, is a huge for the Big 12. UConn, I think they got to be one of the teams that gets added. I just think they do. They bring too much to the table. If we're trying to be the best basketball conference in the country, which we are, but if we're really trying to solidify that, you bring them on, you deal with everything else that they deal with. I don't know how much their other non-revenue sports, what they contribute. I really don't. But I do know that college basketball, men and women, I know they're making money there. And I go, so if their football can just be competitive, again, you're going to need those schools to be competitive. Big Ten's got it. SEC's got it. Big 12, we need it too. So, to be competitive, I just think you got to add them to us.
It's interesting, and I want people to understand this, that when we talk about Big 12 basketball, nobody's on the impression that it's going to be a basketball first conference.
No.
It'll be a basketball heavy conference. And this ACC thing will reveal exactly what Brett Yormark and the executive board are after. If they talk Duke, if they talk Louisville, if they start talking UConn, it's about basketball.
Absolutely.
And here's what they're attempting to do. They're certainly not shoving football out of the limelight. It does bring the most money. What they're doing is trying to close the gap. Let's be honest, and all the viewers, be honest with yourselves. What football programs could the Big 12 add that would close the financial gap with the Big 10 and SEC?
Yeah.
Probably no one, unless Florida State's coming and Clemson, probably no one. But if you break basketball out and you've added Louisville and UConn, Duke, Arizona, Houston, maybe, he gets his non-football expansion with, Gonzaga and Villanova, a balance of schools that come in without football, but bring every other sport. You are so good in basketball. Turner might look at you as their replacement for the NBA and say, yeah, we're going to do studio shows. We're going to show you every week. And, it just might be a huge thing. And that's the card he's playing. That's how he feels like he can shorten up that gap with those other two conferences. And Brien, if you get good in basketball, you get that kind of visibility in basketball in which people are getting used to watching Big 12 basketball, they're getting used to the Big 12.
Yes.
And maybe that spills over then into football where people like, oh, I've been watching Baylor play a lot of basketball. Been watching Kansas State, and those schools play a lot of basketball. Look, they're playing right now in football. Let's turn on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the plan. That's the play. I think Brett Yormark, I really think he's on top of it. A lot of things are going to happen this summer, so I'm interested. I just wish it got here quicker. That's all.
Yeah.
We're in April. I just want it to be done. I want the decisions to be made, and let's get moving on this thing. So it'll happen soon enough. But in the rest of the week, people, before we cancel or shut down the show here, rest of the week, we got Adam Munster Tiger from Colorado coming in. He's going to talk about what in the hell is going on with Colorado tomorrow. Thursday, we've got West Virginia and Cincinnati coming in, talking about some of their preferences on what the ACC may bring and what they would like, and their thoughts on maybe it falling apart. Friday, we've got North Carolina coming in and what they think about the ACC falling apart and what their stance on all of this is, because we know North Carolina is just a huge player in all of this. So got a fun packed full of days coming up here. So I appreciate everybody. Again, as always, remember to like, follow, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're still growing. I see them every day. The subscriptions are coming in. We're trying to get to 1,000. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. We need some help. We appreciate it. Thank everybody for supporting us, and we will be back tomorrow. Have a good one.
This has been a Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.